Hello, audience. So nice to have you here. Hi, speakers. We are here today to talk about speed up, optimize, and scale your onboarding with these great panelists. I cannot wait for you, audience, to hear what they have to share with you today. For those, today's event is brought to you by the team at Modern Sales Pros. And for those of you not familiar with MSP, we are the world's largest and highest quality community for those in sales management, sales leadership, sales and revenue operations, sales enablement, aka our Modern Sales Pros. And our mission is to create an environment for our members to answer questions they will struggle to solve on their own and help them see around corners they might not know about. And we do that through great live sessions like this one you're about to experience. We have a robust online forum and we have quarterly summits. And finally, we are starting to get back to in-person events, which is very, very exciting. Who in the audience misses in-person events? So go in the chat and tell me if you want to join us in a future in-person event. And I see that Ben is telling us where he is calling from. So audience, go in the chat and tell us where you're calling us from. So maybe we have an in-person event around your neighborhood. Um, and as I mentioned, we have quarterly summits, and we just had one in October. It was fantastic. We have so many good recordings. So I just dropped a link in the chats for you to access all the recordings and see all the knowledge that our speakers share during the event. But that's enough. Let's focus on how to get the most out of this session. I have some more housekeeping notes. First, this event is being recorded. We could not let all this knowledge from the panelists go to the ether. So we are recording it, and you will be able to access the recording in the previous events page at the MSP website. And you will also receive a follow-up email later today. And second, I was talking with the panelists before, and they said they love answering questions. So please let's use the Q&A and the chat. Let's ask them all the questions that we want, everything that we need, and they will be happy to answer you. And one last thing before we jump into content, we at MSP, we do not work alone. So we have today, Catalyst is sponsoring this great panel. They put together amazing content for us. So I'm gonna pass it to Sydney. She will introduce us to the work that Catalyst is doing. And then Sydney, you can kick things off by introducing yourself, introducing the panelists, and the fun can start. It's your time to shine, Sydney.
Awesome. Thanks so much for the warm welcome, Eduardo, and amazing baller logo list that you had there. Super impressive. So as you mentioned, my name is Sydney Strader. I have the fortune of leading customer success at Catalyst. And Catalyst is a customer success platform that allows you to manage at scale your existing customers in order to ensure that they're getting full value from your product. That is in turn going to drive revenue. So gross retention, expansion revenue, and drive pipeline through referrals and references for your amazing go-to-market team on the sales and marketing side. So super excited to have a rock star group of panelists with us today to dive into a very meaty topic that is directly aligned to customer value and retaining that revenue and driving growth within your customer base. So I'm going to popcorn us around to each of our panelists who are going to share their name, company they represent, and the role that they have today. And also, in the spirit of American Thanksgiving being very near in our future, they're going to share their favorite Thanksgiving dish. So Jackie, why don't we kick it off? Start with you and then popcorn to whoever you'd like next.
Awesome. Well, I am super excited to be here today. I am Jackie Norton, and I am the Director of Customer Onboarding at Spekit. Spekit is a just-in-time learning platform that enables employees to learn right in the workflow of where they're already working in their day-to-day. And I'm calling in from Burlington, Vermont today. And my favorite Thanksgiving dish is broccoli casserole, which is very basic flavors. It is frozen broccoli, Ritz crackers, lots of butter, and some Velveeta cheese, and that's it. And I love it.
Solid classics.
Oh, all the classics right in one dish.
Awesome. Amazing. Thanks, Jackie. Why don't we popcorn it over to Paul? I'm just going sequentially based on what I'm seeing on my screen here. Paul, over to you.
Sounds good. I'm Paul Holder, CEO and co-founder of OnRamp, which is actually a platform specifically for customer onboarding. So we work with customer success teams to help scale their onboarding program. So great to be here talking about this topic. today, and I'm calling from Boston, and my favorite Thanksgiving dish I think has to be just mashed potatoes. So just half the plate, probably full of them. I'm a very basic person. Big old dollop of gravy on there makes me happy. So that's it.
Amazing. Thanks, Paul. And Paul, are you like a eat one item at a time, or you like put everything on the mashed potatoes
I used to be
like a mixed bag?
I used to be as a kid. Now it just all gets mashed together. The flavors are very complementary. So.
Solid. I love it. And Beth, over to you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Beth Greenberg. First and foremost, thank you so much for having me on the panel. I'm excited to talk about onboarding. I'm with Pendo, which is a product analytics and in-app guidance tool to really help other products be better. And my favorite Thanksgiving side, I said side because my favorite are the sides, to be honest. And my favorite side is squash casserole. Give me all of that good, heavy, real Thanksgiving food. That's what I'm here for.
Love it. I love a good American Thanksgiving. As a Canadian, there are no 2 days in my 365 days in a year that are more productive than American Thanksgiving. Like, I so appreciate how intentional you are about celebrating that holiday, and I live for the productivity gains I get as a Canadian. Okay, amazing. Super appreciative of the introductions. Let's get right into the meat of the content. So there is so much data to say how integral a customer's onboarding is to ultimately drive their retention and overall growth potential as a customer. And so I would love to hear from all of you, like, how do you define a successful onboarding? Is it time? Is it certain metrics attained? Is it product adoption? There's so many different, spans the spectrum of what this could look like. Would love to hear from all of you what success looks like from an onboarding and why that's the case based on your experience to date.
I'll go ahead and jump and start in. Being the only one that doesn't really have onboarding in my title, I think it's really important to talk about this from a CS perspective. What we really focus on is value here whenever we get a brand new customer. So we don't necessarily focus on speed per se, but more so time to value, and doing that by understanding why the customers purchased and trying to get them to that point of value that they have the expectation for, yes, as quickly as possible, but not in a sense of just going through it fast, but doing it in the right way to hit on the points that will help them be set up for success for much longer term than just in the onboarding phase.
Awesome.
And I agreed 100%. I think one just tip that I found is helpful is oftentimes when teams get started, they're like, I don't really know what does that mean, that first block of value or that building block of value. And to that, I would say, talk to your sales team. And often I like to say, come up with a menu of 3 to 5 value items that your customer can actually choose from. Have it be really defined and use that as your guiding light. Probably 3 to start, 5 might be a little bit too many, but the point is have it be very clearly defined so that you're actually reaching towards a goal, right? Otherwise it's nebulous and you can't communicate that effectively to customers. That's not a good situation. So make sure it's really well defined and have your customer tell you, involve them as much as possible, of course.
Awesome. Love that, Paul. And Jackie, I'll let you jump in a sec. One of my favorite questions is like, what's the story you want to be able to tell? And I think when you put that, to your customers, it's like, hey, we're going to, connect in 3 months, and like, what's the story and business impact you want to be able to tell you've achieved? Like having them think through that and articulate that. And then as like, the implementation team or CS team, like working on, okay, what is the path to get to that outcome? I think is really powerful, but I also love, Paul, like your discipline of just defining that for customers so that they can really like just lean into it. Then there's obviously so much repeatability and scale that you can build around those common outcomes and what the playbooks are to help customers get to value. Jackie, over to you. What can you tell us about success?
Yeah. So one of the biggest questions I got asked when I started at Spekit was, what is the end of onboarding? And when we were all chatting before this, I used the concept of everboarding, where onboarding doesn't really end with the onboarding team. The CS team picks it up right after. And for us, the definition of success for onboarding, in part, it's not the only part, is product adoption. And so it is our onboarding team's goal to get our customers to that first big milestone of product adoption. For us, that is launching to our customers and users. But of course, that doesn't stop with onboarding. That continues with the CS team, where they will do a phase 2, phase 3 of the launch. And it is like a cyclical process. But the way that we have defined it is get them to that phase 1.
Awesome. Love that. Thanks, Jackie. Beth, you tapped on this a little bit in terms of like speed and the importance of that. I know, personally as a leader of CS, a lot of pressure I've gotten is like, we need to get customers, launched faster. Today G2 Crowd says like, we're really fast. So we're going to get like the top, most implementable product, and it's 45 days. And then we need it to be 30 days. And then we need it to be 20 days. And then it's like, can we make it 15 days? And I'm always like, is that what we should be pushing? Or like, where is the opportunity for me to push back and just manage expectations? That's not actually what you want us to be able to, drive towards as a success metric. So curious to hear like your take on speed versus quality, and how you really like manage expectations across the board of, speed not being what ultimately we're trying to drive towards here.
Yeah, I think what's important is it's not the same for every customer, for sure. If you're working with a large enterprise customer, and for us, we're working with their release cycles, their release cycle isn't necessarily going to be in a 2-week sprint. It might be in like a 6-month sort of rollout. So it's determining where the customer is at, and then determining what points that are important within the onboarding that you can push to get them to go quicker. If we can get them in this sprint versus the next sprint type of thing, let's definitely be persistent there. But then also understanding that, okay, when we're thinking about time to value, we're really going back to what are the business outcomes that they want to attain, and what does that mean for their business? So if we're working with a smaller customer that only has to work with their own team to do something that they set out to do in Pendo, for example, deflect support tickets, that's going to be much less time versus a larger enterprise customer that has to coordinate across multiple different functions and multiple different teams. So I think it is breaking it down step by step, and then determining which ones you can speed up, and then which one is the best approach. How can you do this together with a customer in a more of a partnership perspective, especially when you're moving up market? Does that kind of answer the question?
Yeah, it definitely does. And I've found that, initial kind of gut reactions, I was like, what within CS's control do we have the opportunity to further optimize to make it faster? But I've also found like integral partners are the product and the sales team. Product in terms of like, what are the easier, like out of the box built motions that your product can offer that you don't have to like teach and educate every customer to achieve. And then from a sales standpoint, like better educating the buyer so that they're prepared in terms of onboarding to run versus come in and start the education process there. Jackie, Paul, would love to hear like your take as well in terms of like speed versus quality, and what's most critical there.
Yeah, I'll second what Beth said, that it really depends on the customer goal. So if their timeline, which tends to be our smaller customers, is 1 to 3 months to launch, we have to really assess in the onboarding process, what is the nice to haves versus the need to haves. And if we have a short turnaround time, we'll address the need to haves in terms of like product training. For us, it's getting content in, and some of the nice to haves will leave for the CS team. For our larger enterprise clients, they do tend to take a longer time to get onboarded. And so we can bake in those nice to haves. But I think it's a fine balance of figuring out what the customer's timeline goals are, and also defining really what is the need to haves during your onboarding process. You can't have everything in the onboarding process. There's truly a fine balance of like trying to teach everything and like just getting the important points across.
I think one thing that we need to talk about too is this idea of momentum versus speed. I think speed, what does that mean? Like, what does that mean? Why does that matter, right? Like, I think as CS professionals, what we really care about is, do we feel like we've kept the momentum from the sales process high? It's at its highest point, as we know, once that deal gets signed. And we've all been in situations where that momentum remains high, do you care whether it took 2 months versus 2.5 months versus 3 months in that case? No, you don't care, because the momentum was high, the energy was high, we were making steady but sure progress. That's fine. Like, I would take the 3-month onboarding all day if every single one could be like that, right? Momentum means we're making incremental progress toward the goal at some consistent pace. And so we actually talked to a bunch of end customers who implement software, and they tell us, hey, we only have 5 minutes a day to think about this new product or tool amongst the million other things I have going on. So are we taking advantage of that 5-10 minutes that they have? If we are and we're making progress, we're going to feel the momentum. We're going to care a little bit less relatively about the speed in which that happened, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, selfishly, one of the reasons I love hosting these webinars is because I get to like pick the brains of these brilliant individuals in front of me. And so I'm going to give you a scenario that I'm experiencing at Catalyst. So our engineering and product teams, product velocity shipping is like out of this world right now. Like that team is humming, and in customer success, that is just like music to our ears, which is amazing. But what it's putting pressure on the CS team to do is adjust and iterate on our customer journey. So previously, we had kind of defined what time to value was for customers, what the feature adoption was necessary for that to be accomplished. However, Catalyst has just launched amazing things like health score and journeys and playbook sequencing that are like really the meat and the beef of like what our product can drive in terms of retention and expansion revenue and true like business impact. And so the challenge with those 3 features is they actually require like the most effort because there's a methodology behind it, right? How do you define your customer journey? How do you think about your health score and building it? And so it's not just like a plug and play, because like to your point, Jackie, especially in a large organization, there's a lot of stakeholders that have to be involved to be able to do that. So my question for all of you is like, as your product org builds out these very sticky, high value features that actually take more time than the traditional, like, okay, plug and play, you're good to go. Would you incorporate that into the onboarding scope? Or would you, like, to Jackie's point, kind of stagger it? And Beth, I think you mentioned this too, to like incorporate this into the CS responsibility after implementation. Like, curious to get your take on that.
I can speak to that. First of all, super excited for all of Catalyst features. I'm a big Catalyst fangirl over here. I've had it at 2 companies now. So that's a really good question. I think it comes down to the kickoff call and like what customer goals are and aligning on that. And I think it's up to the onboarding rep or the CSM to synthesize like what is most important. And if that's timeline and let's just say health score, then maybe the life cycle waits. If they like want to turn around in 1 month and you think that that's going to take up the most time for health scores, then as a CSM, I would try to digest everything that I'm hearing and spit back out like the most important things to get them to that value. But to Paul's earlier point, momentum is most important. So if the goal is to go live in a month and health score is the top priority, then the CSM can then pick right back up with the lifecycle management, because again, onboarding is not going to be done, right? It's continual product adoption. And so that's a great layup for the CSM to be like, okay, great. Now we're going to talk about customer life cycles.
I love this scenario. I do feel like it's important to make a statement that I would love a CSM to be able to talk to every single one of our users at every single point, especially when a new product feature is released that would add value to the customer. In that case, I feel like we need to take a step back and actually think about what's the best way to do this at scale. So what we actually do is we do a lot of in-product notifications to onboard these customers to these new features within the product, so they don't necessarily have to lean on an actual human to tell them about it. Now, does that mean that a CSM all of a sudden becomes obsolete? Absolutely not. It allows the CSM to reach more people at the same time because that's done through the product. It almost feels like a CSM is holding their hand within the product, but they can also reinforce it from a strategic perspective. So if it is important for the customer in the onboarding phase, like that feature is a part of the reason they purchase, absolutely included in the kickoff. But then obviously things are going to be released after they have a kickoff call. That's not the only time they're getting onboarded. So the CSM it gives them a reason to reach back out. Have you seen this in the platform? Does this help you with your business outcome or your ROI? why that is the reason you even purchased our product. So I would say definitely use it. Use that opportunity to communicate both in-app and then reinforce with the human approach.
Yeah, great point, Beth, especially the post onboarding experience, because all lives on. Everboarding continues, as Jackie would say. Awesome. Paul, what do you think?
Yes, Sydney, I think it's a great problem to have, obviously, but like I think you can keep it pretty simple and think about when sales is going and pitching and demoing, where do customers' eyes light up, right? If it is the new hotness and there's a good reason for that and they feel like that delivers outsized value, even if it is a little bit more arduous, it may make sense to start there because that is what they're most excited about, and that is, if you probably ask them like, why'd you buy Catalyst? They may mention that one thing or two things, not the 10 other things that may be easier, but it's not they don't care or you won't do it, but like, that's not why they bought or why they felt like it was we need this right now type of situation. So I really think, like, assuming there's not 30 of those things, and you need to get ruthless to some degree, but like, see where prospects' eyes light up. Watch the demo calls. We're all recording them these days, right? Like, as a CSM, you can absolutely do that. If not, talk to the salesperson. And I think let that be your guide, especially early on, as you are just shipping and iterating really quickly on the product.
Yeah, I love that. And yeah, it's I think that discipline of just like listening to the customer and then applying recommendations. And I really love the format that you said, Jackie, in terms of like the need to have versus the nice to have. If we listen to our customers and then be prescriptive with the need to haves, then the nice to haves can come later, but we'll keep the momentum humming on the needs to have, which will be most impactful. So great call out. Beth, I know this is like your world, the world that is Pendo and automation and scale. I think old school mentality was, hey, there's a human and there are steps for that human to facilitate an implementation. Obviously, Paul, this is very much in your world too, in terms of a really slick, comprehensive, efficiency building tool to drive implementation. So very curious to hear from your perspective, like, how early do you make an investment in automation of the overall onboarding experience versus humans starting off with the experience and then automating afterwards?
Yes, live and breathe. I love this question because I think it is such a cool thing to really debate and go back and forth on. And of course, we've tried a few different things here at Pendo with being human-led as well as automating a few things, because we're lucky enough to have a tool at our fingertips that we can do that. So when I started at Pendo, which was quite some time ago, we actually did all of our onboarding that was human-led, and we did that because we were learning our customers still, and we were learning how they were interacting with our product and what actually lit their eyes up, for lack of a better term. Thank you for that, Paul. I'm going to use that going forward. But after we did that quite a few times, we realized that we were hitting on the same things over and over again. And so to create scale there and really efficiencies, we realized that there were some things that we could easily automate. I'll give you a couple of examples. One thing was, and this was even at a past company, customers always wanted to know, well, how do I add users here? I need to get my team set up. So it was like a very simple, we have an in-app guide to really take people to that, because it's one of those things that's not necessarily top of mind, but absolutely necessary to do to get the team all up on board. And so think about those types of things that you're seeing doing over and over and over again. If that's the case, I would suggest automating those. So then your CS team or your onboarding team, whoever owns onboarding, can be more strategic and really focus on the business level goals that the customer has, and instead of the tactical, mundane things that just have to be done.
Yep. Great point. Paul, Jackie, any thoughts there?
I think it's a combination of both. And I think there's a lot of variations at play. For instance, if it's a product-led growth company and there is a trial, then the trial, in my eyes, would have some sort of in-app guidance followed by a combination of like a CSM handholding or onboarding manager handholding. I think it depends on your customer segments. If you have a large SMB space and it doesn't make sense to put a one-to-one person to customer ratio, then automation is great. And I think it depends on the complexity of the product too. So if there's no trial and it's a pretty formal sales process, then automation at the beginning might not make sense. But I am a big fan and proponent of automating whatever you can and doing a combination when possible. For us at Spekit, we do both. We have two types of users. We have our admins, and then we have our viewers, which are all employees of that company. And we do a very automated system for the end user, the end consumer. It's just too many people to touch on a one-to-one basis. So we do a lot of hand-holding with our admin, but for their end users, we use automation.
Awesome.
Yeah, and I think as teams are kind of getting started on this, I think I'm a big believer in human. Sure, we all use technology. It's 2022, but like human led and dominated for the first, honestly, the first 20 to 30 customers you have, if you truly are a startup just starting out. Those insights are invaluable. They need to be funneled up to the CEO. They need to be shared with the rest of the team. I think full stop, everyone here would agree with that. But as you do go on and get a little, you get those learnings under your belt and you do start to figure out what scales or not. I also like to think about the sophistication of the customer in terms of how we approach this. It's a pendulum, right? Really is what it is. And you can play anywhere in that pendulum in terms of totally automated or totally human led. Mm-hmm. And yes, there's the business need. Your business may be able to not support having a human, even if that's what made the most sense for the customer. But I do like to think about, as you think about those automation strategies, how easy will this be for my customer to adopt and pick up and do? And depending on who your customer is, that answer might vary. And so just consider that as you are thinking about bringing automation into the fold, right, in the different strategies you can employ.
Yeah. Good, great points all around. Lots for me to, this will be a recorded that I share with my whole team in terms of the insights that I know that they'll be eager to capture too. Okay, we're going to go to questions shortly. So make sure you submit all of your questions into the chat. But one closing question preemptively put together by us for the panelists is, if you could do one thing over again as it relates to the onboarding experiences you've built or the teams that you've built who onboard your customers, what would you do differently and why? And I'll let you choose who would like to start.
Why don't we have Jackie start this time?
Jackie, go Jackie.
Well, I also didn't answer the question properly. I said what I would do the same again.
Great. So. If you're so confident in that, crush it. Love the confidence. Go Jackie. What would you do again?
So
proven success is a good thing.
Yeah, I think there was a few questions around like what the first things you would do when implementing an onboarding program. So hopefully this answers that question too. But when I joined Spekit, all the reps' calendars were crazy. There was meetings back to back to back to back, and a lot of them were titled like weekly sync or Scrum meeting. And I interviewed a bunch of customers and tried to get their feedback on the onboarding experience to date. And some of the feedback we were getting was, the meetings didn't have agendas or the reps weren't as prepared as possible. And that caused a couple of issues. One, burnout on the reps. I mean, there was no lunch. There was no bio breaks. And so those are important, right? And as a leader, people internally are more important even than the customers. We need to keep our people sane. And then also the customers are just as important. What am I saying? But we needed to have time in our day to prep for those calls. So the very first thing we did was structure the calls that we offered in onboarding. And that also gave us a clear end. Like, this is our end goal. We are going to offer this series of calls. These are the agendas for each call. And so that dialed back the number of calls in everyone's calendar so that they were able to prepare for those calls. They were able to have agendas and send those to their customers ahead of time and be a lot more deliberate about the conversations that we were having and when onboarding was ending. And that was a huge, that showed a huge improvement. One of just getting onboardings out of onboarding. I mean, we were seeing like 100 plus days in onboarding. And so that helped with that. And then also just with like burnout internally. And then the second thing I would do again is just emphasizing the importance of the kickoff call and really understanding customer goals. Obviously, there's like high level business reasons why they purchase a tool that are great, but are you really going to achieve those goals in onboarding? Probably not. my team will laugh at me, but I talk about leading and lagging indicators all the time. And oftentimes people buy for lagging indicators like increased retention or decreased churn, for instance. And you're not going to be able to tell that at the end of onboarding if you've hit that number or not. And so we want to find success indicators for onboarding so we can prove it's successful and hand it off to the CS team. So those two things I would do again.
Love it. Major insights and learning from that one, Jackie. Thank you. Paul, over to you next. And you could take the path of Jackie, as in things you are so confident in, you would 100% rinse, repeat, or you're like, hey, wouldn't do this again, and here's why.
I do nothing but make mistakes, so I'm just gonna go with that. If I could do one thing over again, I would have picked the winning Powerball numbers last night. That would have been nice,
you wouldn't have shown up today. You'd been like, bye. So.
Admittedly, probably not. But as far as onboarding goes, for onboarding teams I've led, I think lots of things I do over, but one thing that sticks out to me is getting involved in the sales process earlier, like having my team be involved in the sales process. Now, obviously, it depends on the product you're selling a little bit and how self-serve it is, blah, blah, blah. But I think regardless, like, use your onboarding team as a differentiator. It can help you win deals. Don't be afraid of that. Don't be afraid to get close to revenue as close as possible. And by the way, by doing that and introducing yourself, maybe 20 minutes, right? You joined 15 minutes ago. It doesn't have to be a big time sink thing. But for deals that are close to closing, like, get involved, start to build that relationship, understand the dynamics of the customer firsthand, even before that first kickoff call, so that you're getting the handoff from the sales team, but like nothing beats the one-on-one interaction. Like, do that early and often, I think. So, what I would do is just be joining more of those ending sales calls and CS pitches and being like, here's why we rock, right? Not only is our product awesome, but the team we built around is awesome. Rest assured, you're in great hands. Let me talk to you. Let me start that relationship. This is why we're going to be successful together. Would do that earlier than I had perhaps in the past.
Love it. Love the CS flex and the sales motion as a competitive differentiator to get that deal over the line. Super valuable. Yeah. Beth, bring us home.
I'll bring us home. And I love this question because, again, I think that you learn the most from your failures. And I'm proud to say that we're working on a lot of these things. We're never perfect. We're still improving. But the two main things that I would do if I had to do it all over, and they're going to sound almost mundane, but the first one is honestly documentation. When I first started at Pendo, I was lucky to be a part of a very fast growing company. And so we were just trying to get the customer onboarded, move on, go to the next customer, do the next thing. And really, onboarding is so crucial because everyone knows a poor onboarding can really be indicative of churn. So I would have a documentation process to really hone into why the customer purchased and then what value we got them to very quickly there. So then come renewal time, we can look back to that, especially in this day and age. The second thing I would do is visibility into something that's actually very tactical. But for us, we identified that one of the primary drivers of churn was a delayed install. And that was that the customers, let's just say installing Pendo is not difficult. It's not hard, but customers weren't necessarily prioritizing it. Now, when you put something on a dashboard and a CSM sees it and they're like, oh no, my customer hasn't installed in 3 months, huge red flags all over the place. And all of a sudden we're swarming an account, things are getting turned around. And that's much better than finding out 3 months prior to the renewal that they hadn't installed. Those are the two main things, is documentation and visibility into the things that really matter.
Yeah. And sometimes customers just need a good, gentle nudge to get things back on order. And also to be like, how can I help? Like, I know you bought this with the best of intentions. You had clear business outcomes you wanted to drive. Clearly, this isn't the priority and focus. Like, what can we do to help you, course correct and get this back on track? Because you're paying to get value. And like, if we're going to be dead honest, you're not getting value. So super, super important to hold that accountability, but also for your team to have the visibility so that they can get on it and be proactive about driving it forward. So we are right on time. Kristen has one hot question that she has posted that has gotten 10 votes. So we are going to start with Kristen's question. How do you drive urgency for customers who are dragging their feet getting to launch or seeing value? Very good question. And Beth may just be able to speak to based on what she just shared, but we'll open it up to everyone on the panelists to share their thoughts and feedback on that one.
Yeah, I was about to say, I mean, visibility and having a playbook for it. But the other thing that I think is very helpful is we actually have a super close partnership with our sales team. And so we will bring the salesperson back in if there is something lagging or dragging, because they're the ones that created that momentum, have the direct connection of the actual revenue that they spent or the money they spent on the product, so they can tie back into the, hey, you guys purchased this for this reason, like we've got to get you going. Of course, if all of our other tactics didn't necessarily work, the CSM, reaching out, management, whatnot.
Awesome. And Beth, question for you on that. Is the sales rep incentivized on the first year renewal, or do they do that out of the kindness of their heart and the investment in the success of Pendo's customers?
Well, that is actually a fiery question, because over the 6 years that I've been at Pendo, it's been different. It's been dependent on how we've been structured. There were times where there was, a sales team and they would just throw it over and they had not necessarily any sort of incentive other than being a good person. But now we have a model where we actually have hunters and farmers. And so we do have, the farmers are very inclined with, if they expand into an account, which is a lot of times a new onboarding for us, they are absolutely on the hook for that renewal. So it's very much a code-driven thing. So it depends, to be honest. It's not perfect.
Yeah, makes complete sense. Jackie, Paul, any thoughts from your experience?
Yeah, I can answer. I think we all deal with this, right, from time to time. There's a big question around the why and understanding that. I think Beth's points are totally salient. But one thing that I often run into in these situations is that the executive buyer or decision maker isn't the person who the implementation or onboarding team is then working with day to day. And there's a disconnect that can happen there. And a lot of times that executive stakeholder is like, hey, my team, go and implement this thing that I'm really excited about, but then that's kind of the extent of it. And you don't know what the relationship is happening behind the scenes there and how often that's being updated, and is that being brought up, or did that executive get pushed to another priority at the time? Is that causing some of the misset communication? So onboarding is still selling, quite frankly. A lot of times, you got to sell the sometimes new people who don't seeing this for the first or second time. Why this is important, I think, first of all, and then don't be afraid to get that executive stakeholder back in the loop if they're not. By the way, tools like OnRamp can automate some of that for you and help drive some transparency and updating there. Just a little plug, but regardless, make sure you control that narrative of the team and the executive stakeholder and be involved in there. A lot of times that gets turned around quickly when you loop that person back in. You're like, hey, here's what we're seeing. We're ready to go. We're excited about the next steps, but we've seen this stall a little bit. Can you help me figure this out, executive stakeholder? And lo and behold, 2 days later, everything's fixed again. So that's just one maybe more tactical thing that might be helpful.
Awesome. Jackie.
Yeah, so Kristen's on my team, so shout out to Kristen.
Go, Kristen, go.
But I will echo what Beth and Paul said. Getting the AE involved is usually in terms of our playbook, our first step. And what we're working on heavily this quarter is better executive alignment, as Paul alluded to. And then plug for Paul for OnRamp, having some sort of project plan for onboarding. It's been really helpful to point back to specifically where you might be stopped or blocked in the onboarding period, so that you can either share those insights with the champion or the executive of hey, this is exactly where we said, this is exactly where we are. We talked about a timeline of 3 months. We're approaching on that. Is that still your timeline? And leveraging the timeline for urgency around it as well.
Great call out. Okay, I think we probably have time for one more question, which we are going to go to Jacob King, who has had 11 upvotes. Love this question, Jacob. What 3 KPI metrics do you review regularly to scale onboarding performance and effectiveness with your clients?
For us, it is time to launch. So how long does it take us to work with the creation team, so our admins and our experts, those are our lingo internally, to launch to our customers and users. And then time to launch is different than time to end of onboarding, because our last onboarding step includes the handoff to CSMs. And there is a little bit of a delta there. And if there's a large delta, that's a problem, right? If they don't want to get back on the phone to talk about the results of their first launch and then talk through their handoff, that's a red flag. So we look at time to launch, time to close, or time to end of onboarding. And we implemented a CSAT for onboarding as well last quarter. So we look at that metric.
Thanks, Jackie. Paul?
Agreed. Those are no-brainers. I think here's one thing that that might be a little more controversial that I don't even know how to define quite yet, but I am going to try to start to implement with my team, and that is what I'm calling upsell readiness as a success metric. What does that mean, and how do you define that? Great question. I'd love to talk to people and figure that out, and have that discussion. But I think one of the things is, again, as we think about onboarding being as close to revenue as possible, as your product grows and matures, no doubt there will be opportunities to upsell that customer. And upsell, by the way, may mean actual dollars. It may also just mean additional features and functionality and adoption metrics. But if there's a way to define, is this customer green, yellow, red? Do we think they're upsell ready? Do we think that they've gotten that base value and they're ready for the next thing? That would be a really interesting thing to track, besides the stuff that was mentioned before, which are absolute no-brainers for sure.
Awesome. Interesting concept for those. Hit up Paul on LinkedIn to start collabing with him on bringing that to fruition. Beth, thoughts from your experience?
Yeah, so I think that they covered the main onboarding stats. I will add to that, Paul, we do track time to expansion, which is absolutely, just one thing, especially on the CS side, because we feel like, hey, if they're having a wonderful experience and they're successful, they will expand. But the one thing that we actually track that I think is a little different than CSAT or anything like that is we track what we call positive business outcomes and customer verified outcomes. So I constantly go back to, why they purchase, and we're all about that value selling to really tie to their business. So it's not just a feature functionality conversation. So we look at, okay, for our named segment, which is upmarket, mostly in the enterprise space, do we know their positive business outcomes and are they documented? And then throughout the onboarding and beyond, the CSMs are tasked with capturing their customer verified outcomes. And so we do take a look at CVOs to PVOs to see how many we're actually accomplishing to get those wins for their customers. So it's a little different than just getting through onboarding, but very helpful for us to keep the conversation on value.
Amazing. Okay, Eduardo, I'm going to let you be the boss. We have 2 minutes. Do we take a stab at one other question, or do you need to close us out? I think we can maybe do one more. All right. I'll make an executive decision. We're going to do one more. Eduardo, is that cool with you?
Yeah, that's perfect. Let's do one more.
Amazing. Okay. So Jack Patterson said, what 3 questions would you ask yourself before building an onboarding process from scratch? Maybe we do 1 question each, and then that'll be the closing. So what 1 question would you ask yourself before building an onboarding process from scratch?
Just to me, what strikes me as if you are just building it new, I would say, what are you trying to, like, every new process you put in place, onboarding or otherwise, is an opportunity to learn and to say, what is it we're trying to achieve first? So if the answer is, hey, we know our customers are successful with our product once they get kind of up and running, well, maybe that's great. Maybe there's an opportunity to say, where do the bottlenecks exist within each of the tasks that we're kind of putting together, right? If the answer is like, actually, half of our customers we think are struggling because we're starting to see some churn metrics, well, then keep it simpler and say, hey, as we build our onboarding program, let's figure out and ask, again, what is that, to Beth's point, she said it about 100 times, like, what is it that our customers are telling us gets them to value? And let's categorize and document that and start to develop a thesis around that and start to build an onboarding program around that. So I think it really depends on, like, given the status and maturity, like where exactly you want to learn, but don't try to learn 5 things at once. That's a disaster, right? Try to learn one thing at once and then build off of that, right? Otherwise, you're going to get all these different data points in all different directions. That's not helpful for you building a program.
Awesome. Thanks, Paul. Jackie, one question.
Wow, Paul's answer was very good. I think the first thing I would want to understand is like what is the activation or aha moment of the product and work backwards from there.
Mm-hmm. Love it. Jackie, short, sweet, woo, to the point. All right, Beth.
Yeah,
finale?
I was actually going to say a quick plug for Pendo. I would take a look at what the healthiest customers, even if you're just starting, you can hear from your CS team, these are the best customers. They're super successful. And I would take a look and see exactly what they're doing in the product and then replicate that. So I'd ask, what are my best customers doing?
Yeah, great starting point. Love it. Okay, crushed as always. Thank you so much to Jackie, Paul, and Beth for being amazing panelists. So much insight. I learned a ton too, which I am greatly appreciative of. Eduardo, I will let you close us out, and then we'll officially wrap.
Thank you very much, Sydney. You are a fantastic moderator. What a fun panel. I had received a lot of messages, people just saying like, I want the recordings right now, send it to me. And you will receive the recording, audience. Thank you so much for joining us today. The best part of MSP is definitely our audience. Thank you for all the questions. And panelists, that was fantastic. I took so many notes. I'll have to add it down to put on the website for the key takeaways later. But thank you for joining us today. We are going to wrap things up. But again, thank you, audience, for attending. We love having you here. And thank you to our wonderful Catalyst. If you didn't notice, there is a request demo with our sponsor at the top of this page. So click this button to see what Catalyst is up to. I am going to paste our panelists LinkedIn again in the chat so everyone can connect with them and continue the fun and see all the knowledge that they're sharing there. So again, thank you, Sydney, Beth, Paul, and Jackie for providing this great content. The recording and key takeaways will be available in the MSP website shortly. And don't forget, once you're there, to check the recording, check the upcoming events. We have more events with Catalyst coming up. So stay tuned. It's going to be a lot of fun. Panelists, we can go hang out backstage. And audience, thank you so much for joining us today.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.